But oftentimes people just assume that it's like the traditional mortgage, traditional industry where I do one thing, or I buy an LOS, or I implement something different on servicing, or I implement servicing with blockchain, and that's going to solve all my problems and make me have better customers and higher margins and all those wonderful things. The problem is that when you look at this digital era that we are in today, and the fact that being digital was just the entry fee, and oftentimes within the mortgage industry, we digitized the paper system. We digitized the transaction. We didn't rework the process. We didn't look at things differently. If we think we went from quarter one, where we actually had profitability on a per loan basis, to a negative $81 last quarter per loan, where's the future going to be? 2 weeks ago, everybody was saying, "Oh, rates are going under 5%, under 5%." 2 weeks later, they're pushing 6, and the problem is that these things are not going to go away in a heartbeat. They're not like the tradition. This is a fundamental re-imaging of the industry, and the business models moving forward are not what they were in the past.
No, I agree, Mark. And the reason I think that this series is going to be so important is because we're finally going to let people start talking about the specifics of these solutions, because it's not, as you say, it's not a general panacea that's going to solve the problem. Oh, no, we're away from the branch model, we have a blockchain. It means nothing until we have an application that can be put into production after being thoroughly tested, meet our compliance requirements, and then meet our customer requirements. We have some really innovative people in our industry, and I can't wait to see how they're talking about this stuff, because too many of the conversations I've heard and read about over the past 2, 3, 4 years have been so general as to be useless, not useful in any way. So we really have to get down to find out what should we be considering and how can we have those conversations.
And they're very uncomfortable conversations. Think about it. I mean, if you look at the terminology, the traditional terminology of a bank, is trust and verification and all those wonderful things. When you look at what we start talking about in this technology and how the processes are going to be, and we impose all these digital world of millennials and Gen Zs and even their parents, the Gen Xs, you look at what they're struggling with and where they're going in the economic situation, that's a whole different vernacular. And so as bankers and as people that independent individuals that fulfill those loans and put them onto the secondary or sell them to a GSE, the whole dynamic of how we communicate, what we're communicating, needs to be transformed. And we have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, if that's such a thing. There's an old Mark Twain, and you've heard me say this before, Mark Twain used to say, it's not what we know or don't know that gets us into problems. It's what we know for sure that just isn't so. And
Exactly.
Oftentimes in the industry, we assume that we have this. We know where the industry is going because we follow our competitors. And you kind of say, well, are your competitors going down the right path? Is there a better way to do this? And that's what I think we talk about in this series, to say, what is new out there? How do we approach this when the industry goes from a transaction mindset, which is really everything we've ever done, from starting with the 1003 all the way down to the underwriting documents and as you said, the regulatory compliance docs, into the securitizations. And what do you do with that? And that's a whole different mindset to say, well, if the customer's at the center and they control their digital assets, and you have things like data sovereignty, and they let you have it just for a period of time, you don't have access to that documents. How do you continually make money when you always start from a net zero of non-trustworthy documents and verify everything else? We're never going to get beyond that 45 to 75 days. And it will be interesting to see people that lead this industry forward, what they're thinking and how they're approaching it different. And I think that's the exciting process. In 5 years, this could be a completely changed industry with margins and profitability that we haven't ever seen. The challenge for the industry is we always think we had to take the solution. It was like an 8.5 by 11. So whatever on a page, whatever was printed on that page, that's what we took. That was the solution. We now can take through innovation and the fintech advancements, the there's 13,500 fintechs. There are another nearly 500 reg tech vendors out there. Even today, even with the downtrend, you sit there and say they have great building blocks. They don't have banking as a solution, or mortgage as a solution in a turnkey box, but they have a piece. And as innovators, as mortgage bankers, as people leading the IT, the have you considered is really about taking those building blocks and, like a child, how do I arrange them? How do I spell something different? Because everybody in the industry will have access to them. How you assemble, how you disassemble, how you create things like another foreign concept, digital fabrics, digital meshes. How do you get that capability to survive beyond the systems is all about how you assemble those building blocks. Because guess what? Those blocks are going to be transitory. Oftentimes in industry, we talk about two different things in innovation and how we advance. We talk about the exploratory side and we talk about the exploiting side. And as a mortgage industry, we've been exploiting because that's all we know. We haven't changed the process. We haven't changed the fundamental landscape, like the bookcases behind me. We don't change that. We just change the books on the shelf. And what's happening today is that we're beginning to say that has a limited set of returns when the market rebalances. So now we've got to back into this exploring type of a situation and re-image how the mortgage world goes. And I think that's, in my mind, the exciting thing when we start talking about have you considered. There are many, many good people out there with some brilliant ideas. The problem is they don't necessarily have the connectivity pieces. And the IT organizations, the leaders of these financial organizations are going to have to step up and say, I can assemble that differently. And that's what everybody's focused on. And I think what we're talking about with this show and what you've alluded to is how do we compete in the future? And that is a different animal. That's a different strategy than saying, let me just improve my margins, which is oftentimes what we do in a downturn. All these privacy issues that are now getting written into regs, especially on the EU, and now in the US on a state-by-state basis, these are going to be some important considerations that never hit the mortgage banker before. Moving away from the idea of applications or solutions or mobile apps or whatever you want to call them, into something that's data driven, bringing together data encapsulated solutions that can be used and stacked and not have to go back to zero trust verification all the time, which adds cost, adds time, adds complexity to our industry.
Yeah.
That's really where we go. And we have the security capabilities. We have things like blockchain. We have be able to provide system of records. Well, when you take a different view and say, if data is the center of my world and the application is just how I operate against it, how do I ensure that I am incorporating the integrity as well as the longevity of that? So I think that'll be really key, because that's going to be a key differentiator on cost, and customer satisfaction, customer for life mindset. I mean, data is that fundamental thing. That's why we went digital, for goodness sakes. How do I begin to understand or embrace the idea that systems are not multi-year, multi-decade survival, in terms of they survive for X number of years and that's where I'm at and I'm locked into that vendor and what have you. How do I ensure that if I'm an IT person or I'm a leadership person, that I create those building blocks that are more, when I say incremental, transitory, that I can be replaced without toppling the whole apple cart?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the guests that we want to have on the show. We and I have both done a lot of podcasts. We've both done hundreds of interviews. I've done thousands of interviews for the various publications. And I've talked with a lot of really smart, very innovative executives who are kind of bound by their marketing requirements to stick to a general story about a general class of solutions. Not so interested in that for this show. How about you?
Not really. Going back to the original ideas, if our industry is about trust and satisfaction and getting customers and retaining customers for life, we have to understand that our customers are demanding something different. So to go to a show, to continue with that marketing scenario of this is how it is, we have a commoditized product and that's what we market, versus saying, I understand my customer, I'm listening to them, I'm changing my messaging, I'm embracing new alternatives that may be outside of the industry, like you're saying. Lots of bright people coming from all over the world. the mindset of how this goes, like a supply chain, is so different. If we kind of view what we do as manufacturing and we're producing something that the customer wants, but also that has to be sourced and ethically balanced and all these good things. I don't want to hear your same old message of saying, well, I can get you this and this takes this and here's our loan process. That's not so exciting. And I'll guess I'll drive that point home with one thing that I was in a discussion yesterday and somebody said, we were talking about re-changing the mortgage industry. It was a very broad a field type of thing, strategy and objectives and all this great stuff. And somebody said, I said, well, what happens when we shift that around? And the answer came back, well, the customer expects that. That's what the customer gets. That's what the customer knows, that it takes all this time. And my kind of pointed, barb was back, well, what happens when they don't?
But I want to talk to executives who talk to us about ideas that maybe we're not thinking about yet, but we need to, right? So they may say, well, blockchain's the answer, but we need to consider this. Or they may say, no, we're going to spread a data mesh across the entire country and we're going to give the government access to it because they want all of our data anyway, but we have to consider this. That's what I want to hear, because those considerations, they're out there and only the leaders are going to focus on them and come up with their answers.
You want to talk about the implications of what that innovation is. So in essence,
Yes.
if I adopt a blockchain, if I adopt another LOS or a servicing solution or deal with mortgage servicing rights, whatever those things may be, what are the implications of doing that? So you can say that is great, just like the sky is blue or I have no hair or whatever the case may be. But you can do that. However, what's the implication? And the other part of your answer was so true, is that I can say that's the implication, but does it fit my organization? Is my organization, my people, my skills, my systems, my outreach to my customers, back to your marketing, my dialogues, everything, is that even aligned or capable of embracing those implications? And if not, what do I need to do? But I think that's where the industry is heading. And there are people that are leading us there if we just kind of tune our ear to say, what does that mean? And the last thing I think that will be interesting for people to talk about on this show is, we always think and we kind of project this vision and that's where we're going. There is no way this industry, there is no way one organization, I don't care, pick your biggest organization, pick your smallest innovator, you're not going to go from point A to utopia in one fell swoop. This is a iterative type of process. I used that word a few minutes ago. It's stepwise, and you're going to ratchet this up, and you're not going to be successful in some of these, but you're going to go again, and you're going to go again. You're going to learn from these things. These are not multi-year efforts. These are things that are hit in anywhere from 15 to 120 days. You hit them, you learn, go on. That's what our industry, we are in a contact sport right now in this industry, versus the collegial nature that I think we always believed we had. And I think the new competitors are going to make this very competitive very quickly. And that's what I love to hear from people on the show is like, have you considered? Because there are so many avenues that are going to smack people upside the head and say, wow, I hadn't thought of that. And that's okay. That's what we're here to talk about and map it to your organization. And only you as leaders can really do that.
Don't miss it. Join us for Would You Consider?